We live in an age of loud voices. Everyone speaks, opines, argues, corrects, explains, and yet almost no one is heard. Noise has become an addiction, and within it, silence has become the new form of power. Have you ever noticed how the people who are truly respected speak less? They don't rush to answer. They don't try to win the argument. They don't compete for verbal space, because they already have enough presence to fill the room. And that's exactly what the modern world has forgotten. Those who need to prove, speak. Those who know, observe. Epictetus said that nature gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth so we can listen twice as much as we speak. But most have reversed this proportion. They speak twice as much, listen half as much. The result is predictable: empty discussions, superficial relationships, and leaders without credibility. Real power, however, has always been in calmness, in the pause between words, in the breath before the answer. This video is about silent power, the ability to win without having to speak, to influence without having to dominate, to make the other person listen to you even when you haven't said anything yet. You will discover the 7 levels of silent power, a path that goes from verbosity to total presence. Each level represents an advance in consciousness, energy, and self-mastery. In the first, you will see how excessive talking destroys authority. In the second, how interruption reveals insecurity. In the third, that listening is the first sign of wisdom. In the fourth, that observing is worth more than arguing. In the fifth, that few words carry weight. In the sixth, that a sentence spoken with truth can end any discussion. And in the seventh, that silent presence is the highest form of respect and influence. The purpose of this video is to show you how to master communication without relying on speech, how to become someone who commands respect through posture, not volume, and how to use silence as a weapon of clarity, strategy, and power. Think about the strongest moments you've ever experienced. The look that dispensed with explanations, the silence that ended an argument, the calmness that made the other person lower their tone. Power is in these invisible moments, because the wiser a man becomes, the less he speaks, and the more he weighs. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Only speak when your words are stronger than silence." And that's exactly what this video is about transforming silence into authority and tranquility into presence. So before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Here, each reflection is an exercise in self-control, clarity, and inner strength. And tell me, from which city are you watching this video? I want to know how far the power of silence is reaching. Now prepare yourself for the first level, the stage where speech is constant, the ego seeks to be heard, and respect dissolves in the excess of words, the level of the talker. Level 1, the talker. Every man who talks too much is trying to convince himself of something. Those who dominate don't need to fill the silence. The silence already speaks for them. But the talker, the one at the first level, fears the void. He feels that if he stops talking, he loses his value. That's why he explains, justifies, details, repeats. He is a prisoner of his own sound. The talker believes that respect comes from the quantity of words. But in fact, the more he speaks, the cheaper his speech becomes. Words lose weight when they are used as a shield, and energy disperses when sound replaces intention. The world hears him, but doesn't listen to him, because whoever speaks without pause becomes predictable. Imagine a simple conversation. A group gathered, all exchanging ideas. The talker enters and monopolizes the space. He talks about himself, about what he has already done, what he has seen, what he knows. As he speaks, he believes he is impressing, but little by little the looks disperse, the bodies move away. He doesn't realize it, but the excess of voice creates distance, and the respect he tries to conquer with words escapes between his own sentences. Seneca said that whoever speaks all the time hears little and learns less. And perhaps this is the great tragedy of the talker. He doesn't listen to the world, he only echoes himself. Each word spoken before its time is a wasted chance to understand, and every talker lives surrounded by noise, external and internal. Deep down, the talker wants validation. He wants to prove that he is intelligent, strong, interesting, but the wise man knows that true power lies in what doesn't need to be said. Respect is born when presence speaks for itself, not when the mouth rushes. Epictetus said that the fool is recognized by two things, talking about what he doesn't know and being offended when corrected. And that's exactly what defines this level. The confusion between talking a lot and knowing a lot. The talker uses words as a disguise for the fear of being ignored, but the more he tries to be heard, the more silence surrounds him. The transition begins when he perceives the wear and tear of his own voice, when he feels that no one really listens, and that perhaps the problem is not in others, but in the internal rhythm that he has not learned to contain. It is in that instant that the first glimmer of power is born, the recognition of his own verbosity, the understanding that silence can be more convincing than any explanation. This is the invisible limit between noise and mastery, and whoever crosses it discovers the second stage, the territory of the interrupter, the one who still speaks, but now reacts. Not out of need to appear, but out of inability to wait. And the waiting time is the first exercise of presence. Level 2, the interrupter. The second level is treacherous, because here the man already speaks less, but still needs to win the conversation. He interrupts, not because he wants to disrespect, but because he's afraid of not being heard. He listens only to respond, not to understand. And the silence, although it already exists, is still impatient. The interrupter is the talker who has evolved half a step. He begins to understand that talking too much wears him out, but he still can't stand the interval between the other person's word and his own. The pause bothers him, the silence threatens him, so he fills the seconds with haste, justifications, and interjections. It is the stage of sonic anxiety. Imagine a simple scene, a meeting, several people exchanging ideas. A colleague begins to explain something calmly, but the interrupter can't stand it. He cuts in the middle, tries to speed up the conversation, complete the sentence, correct a detail. The intention deep down is to appear efficient. But for those who observe from the outside, what is seen is lack of mastery. Each interruption reveals the fear of losing control, and no one respects someone who doesn't control even their own speaking time. Seneca said that nothing shows more weakness than the haste to speak, and the interrupter lives in this haste, the haste to ensure that his voice is not forgotten. But the truth is that the most remembered voice is always the one that knows how to wait. The power is not in cutting off the other person's speech. It is in letting silence work for you. The interrupter speaks out of anxiety, not out of clarity, and therefore his presence becomes noisy but light. People hear him, but don't feel him, because respect is born when the other person realizes that you have enough self-control not to need to rush. Epictetus said that no one learns when they speak, only when they listen. And it is this listening that the interrupter still needs to develop. Listening to the other is listening to yourself with a delay. It is allowing reflection to mature before turning into an answer. And only those who master the time of silence can master the time of speech. Deep down, the interrupter wants to be right, but he doesn't realize that respect is not born from reason, but from patience. When he finally understands that interrupting is a form of fear, something changes. The pause that previously bothered him becomes comfortable, and it is there, in that newly discovered silence, that the third stage is born. The moment when the man stops competing for sound and begins to listen for real. Level 3, the listener. At the third level, something changes. For the first time, silence is not empty. It is an instrument. The mind stops chasing words and begins to listen to the world with real attention. And when you start listening for real, the environment changes. People relax, the tone of the conversation slows down, and respect begins to form in the space between what the other person says and what you decide to answer. The listener is the one who has already realized that speaking is a waste of energy, and that therefore it is necessary to choose where to invest. He no longer rushes to prove that he knows. He prefers to observe what he doesn't know yet. While others speak, he reads gestures, tones, pauses, contradictions. And without saying anything, he already understands more than everyone. Seneca said that no one is wise for speaking much, but for understanding deeply. And understanding is only born from listening. Deep listening is a form of respect. Whoever listens gives space, and whoever gives space inspires confidence. Therefore, the listener is naturally respected. He creates the field in which the other can reveal himself. Imagine a simple scene, a conversation between two friends. One of them speaks non-stop, pouring out frustrations, criticisms, confessions. The other listens in silence, attentively, without interrupting, without judging. In the end, the speaker lets out a sigh and says, "Thank you, I needed that." And the most curious thing is that the listener hardly spoke, but at that moment, he was the most powerful of the two. The listener understands that respect comes not from the voice, but from listening. The power is not in being heard, it is in being remembered after the silence, because there is an invisible authority in those who know how to listen. The attentive look, the calm posture, the slow breathing. Everything in him communicates without needing to say. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, "Listen patiently, even to what doesn't please you, for it is by listening to the fool that the wise man learns to recognize the error." The listener understands that listening is training. Each conversation is a field of observation. Each word of the other is a map of human behavior. And the more he listens, the more he learns about the world and about himself. At this point, the ego begins to lose strength. The man who previously wanted to be noticed now discovers the pleasure of not needing to say everything. And this pleasure is liberating. But the listener is still an apprentice. He observes, but does not yet transform observation into action. The next level is that of silent discipline, when listening is no longer just patience, but a method of power. Level 4, the note-taker. The fourth level is the beginning of mastery. The man who has reached this point has already understood that silence is not passivity, it is disciplined attention. Now he begins to record, mentally or physically, what he observes. He doesn't speak, but he takes notes. He doesn't respond, but he understands. He doesn't react, but he absorbs. The note-taker is the type of person who, in the midst of chaos, continues to learn. While others become agitated, he observes the patterns: who talks too much, who runs away, who accuses, who silences. And each human reaction becomes data for his own wisdom. He is a student of conduct, and whoever studies behavior inevitably gains power over it. Seneca said that there is no favorable wind for those who don't know where they are going. The note-taker, on the contrary, knows. He records not out of mania, but out of strategy. Each note is an attempt to understand what deserves a response and what deserves to be forgotten. And this simple practice creates an emotional distance between the fact and the reaction. When he writes, the internal fire cools down, because what is put on paper loses the power to burn from within. Imagine someone in an intense professional discussion. While everyone speaks loudly, interrupts each other, and defends themselves, he takes a pen and takes notes in silence. He doesn't challenge, he doesn't react, he just listens and writes. In the end, when the noise dissolves, he looks at the notes, raises his gaze and says something simple, direct and precise, and suddenly everyone falls silent. What seemed distant becomes authority. Respect is born not from speech, but from observed calmness. The act of taking notes is deeper than it seems. It is not about recording information, it's about disciplining thought. It is training the mind to see before judging, to understand before acting. The Stoic does not react on impulse. He records, reflects, and only then responds. This distance between stimulus and action is what separates the common from the wise. Epictetus said, "What disturbs man is not things, but opinions about things." Taking notes is the practical way to see this difference. By writing, you realize what really happened and what is just interpretation. And when the mind distinguishes fact from emotion, power begins to consolidate. The note-taker also represents the beginning of emotional independence. He no longer depends on external feedback, he depends on his own observations. He doesn't speak to be noticed, he observes to understand himself. And this creates a type of confidence that doesn't need an audience. But there is an even more refined stage. After observing and recording, the man begins to speak with precision. He understands that each word must be worth the silence it breaks. And this understanding leads him to the fifth level, the territory of the one who speaks little, where each sentence is measured and each pause has weight. Level 5. The one who speaks little. Getting here is like crossing a desert. The man has already experienced the noise of the world and the fatigue of trying to be heard. Now he speaks little, not out of shyness, but out of understanding. He has discovered that respect grows when words decrease. The one who speaks little is in no hurry to answer. He measures the tone, chooses the words, and speaks only what is necessary. Each sentence is clear, direct, firm. He understood that the power of speech is not in quantity, but in intention. And when he speaks, people pay attention, not because he demands it, but because it is rare to hear him speak. Imagine a tense environment, a meeting full of opinions. Everyone speaks at the same time, trying to be right. But there is a quiet man, sitting in the back, listening to everything calmly. He waits, and when he decides to speak in 2 or 3 sentences, he changes the course of the conversation. The air seems denser, the energy changes, the others lean in to listen. Because there is something sacred in those who master the time of their own voice. Seneca said that it is better to stumble with the feet than with the tongue, and the one who speaks little learned this in practice. He understands that each word can build or destroy something, and that silence, when maintained, can protect what haste would put at risk. Therefore he speaks like someone wielding a sword, with precision, not with vanity. There is a type of power that is only born when speech is contained. The one who speaks little lets the other fill the space with their own contradictions. Silence becomes a mirror, and the other reveals himself. While the talker wears himself out trying to convince, the one who speaks little conquers effortlessly, simply by maintaining serenity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Words should be few, but full of meaning." This is the law of this level. The one who speaks little knows that excess is the enemy of clarity. He prefers to appear distant than to appear confused. He prefers the look to the argument, and when he speaks, his voice is calm, grave, secure, the type of voice that doesn't try to convince, it just states the obvious. The curious thing is that the modern world confuses this behavior with coldness. But the one who speaks little is not cold. He is centered. He chose to leave the noise to others and the strength for the right moment. He doesn't need to win the conversation. He just needs to maintain coherence. And this in itself already puts him on another frequency. This is the stage where power begins to condense. Speech becomes polished, and the silence between sentences carries the same weight as the words themselves. But there is still a step above, the level of the man who has learned to end entire discussions with a single sentence. The one whose calmness ends the chaos, and whose voice, when it arises, closes the matter. Level 6, the one who closes with a sentence. At the 6th level, speech ceases to be explanation and becomes conclusion. Here, the man no longer tries to be understood. He has already become clear. When he speaks, his words end the cycle. There is no debate. There is no echo. The very calmness with which he speaks already defines the end of the conversation. This is the power of the closer, the man who has learned that the truth does not need to be repeated. He speaks once, and that's enough. He doesn't raise his tone, he doesn't prolong, he doesn't convince, he just affirms. And this affirmation, when born from coherence, silences the environment. Imagine a common conflict. Several people arguing, justifying, pointing. The noise grows, the tension increases, until he, the quietest in the room, says only, "We already understand what happened. Now we need to decide what to do." And everything changes. There is no brilliance, there is no drama, but there is real authority. His sentence weighs more than the sound of all the others together. Seneca said that the wise man speaks what is necessary, the fool speaks everything. The man at this level is the first. He understood that a right sentence at the right moment is worth more than an hour of speech. His strength is in precision, and this precision is born from a calm heart, from a mind that has learned to wait for the exact moment to speak. The one who closes with a sentence knows that communication is not in the words, but in the energy behind them. Every time he speaks, he carries the weight of someone who doesn't waste sound, and the world feels it. People listen to him not only for the content, but for the presence that sustains each syllable. Epictetus wrote that whoever masters his own silence masters that of others. And that's exactly what happens here. The closer dominates the environment effortlessly. When he decides to speak, the silence around him organizes itself. The chaos recedes, the confusion dissolves. His voice has structure. It is paused, direct, clean. He doesn't explain, he finishes. The one who reaches this level understood that arguing is wasting energy. Whoever needs to insist has already lost, and whoever speaks with serenity doesn't need applause, because the truth itself is enough. There is a deep dignity in those who know how to stop talking at the exact point. That instant when the world still wants to hear more, but you choose to be silent. There, respect is born. But there is an even higher stage, a level where not even the sentence is necessary anymore, where silence becomes complete, and the simple fact of being present already communicates more than any word. The 7th and last level, the silent presence. Level 7, the silent presence. The last level cannot be taught, only lived. Here the man doesn't speak, doesn't argue, doesn't need to explain himself. He is just there, and his presence is enough. Silent presence is the point where power ceases to be behavior and becomes essence. The energy is so firm, so centered, that the environment adjusts when he arrives. The noises decrease, the looks change, the tone of the voices lowers. There is no effort, just natural authority. Because whoever masters himself no longer needs to master anyone. Marcus Aurelius said that tranquility is the state of the spirit that has found its own place. And that's exactly what defines this level. The man of silent presence has found his inner place, and therefore the world respects him without understanding why. There is no tension, no search. There is only coherence. He doesn't react, doesn't dispute, doesn't compete. He observes, and that's enough. Imagine the figure of a mentor, a father, an elder. He doesn't need to raise his voice to be heard. He doesn't need to say what is right, just the look. His calmness is contagious, his posture is firm, his silence is full of meaning. And those around him feel there is something different there, something that doesn't impose itself, but that manifests naturally. Silent presence is the result of all the previous stages. From the talker who learned to be silent, from the interrupter who learned to wait, from the listener who learned to understand, from the note-taker who learned to observe, from the one who speaks little, who learned to weigh the words, and from the closer who learned to conclude with serenity. All transform into this man who no longer needs to say anything. Epictetus wrote, "He who has achieved self-mastery no longer needs to master anything." This is the essence of the 7th level. Respect is born from tranquility. Influence is born from balance. Power doesn't come from the sound of the voice, but from the absence of internal noise. The man of silent presence is the opposite of the modern world. While everyone runs to be seen, he is noticed for what he doesn't do. While everyone tries to prove something, he lives in such an aligned way that his own life proves for him. His strength is in the look, in the posture, in the way he occupies the space. He doesn't seek prominence. Prominence finds him. There is a type of greatness that doesn't need to be announced. It is perceived. It is that feeling of entering an environment and feeling the energy change, even without words. This is silent power, the power that doesn't need witnesses to exist. When the man reaches this point, silence ceases to be a tool and becomes identity. And that's why the world respects him. Because he carries the serenity that everyone seeks, but that few have the courage to conquer. Silence has sound, but only those who have reached this point are able to hear it. It is the sound of the mind at peace, of the slow breathing, of the whole presence. It is the sound of the man who has overcome his own ego and no longer needs to dispute anything. Each of the 7 levels was a crossing, from the talker to the serene, from noise to balance, from the need to be heard to the ability to just exist with weight. The journey began in the noise, in the eagerness to be noticed, and ended in the absolute mastery of one's own space. The talker wanted to prove value with words. The interrupter wanted to control the rhythm of others. The listener learned the power of listening. The note-taker transformed observation into wisdom. The one who speaks little began to measure the weight of his own voice. The closer discovered that the right sentence is worth more than the entire speech. And finally, the man of silent presence became what he always sought, someone who no longer needs to say who he is. Seneca said that calmness is the sound of the disciplined soul. And that's what this path teaches. Real power is not in the tone of the voice, but in the absence of internal noise. Respect is born when the other person feels that you are imperturbable. And this strength, when achieved, cannot be faked. It is silent but undeniable. The modern world lives obsessed with attention, but the true wise men don't want to be noticed. They want to be understood, even in silence. They know that lasting influence doesn't come from volume, but from presence. While the talker tries to be remembered, the silent one is felt. And this is the power that remains when all sounds cease. Epictetus wrote, "When words become superfluous, true communication begins." Silent power is this, the transition from speech to meaning, from discourse to posture, from voice to look. If you understood this journey, you know that silence is not absence. It is mastery. And from today, perhaps you will realize that you no longer need to win by speaking. Just be present, because silence is not empty. Silence is the home of those who have already learned to inhabit themselves. Take this moment and subscribe to the channel. Here, each reflection is a reminder that true power begins where haste ends. And tell me in the comments, in which of these 7 levels do you believe you are today? Perhaps the simple act of recognizing is already the first step to climbing to the next.